On AI and climate action accelerating sustainable solutions. Climate change and AI are two of the most significant factors shaping our collective future, and so the interaction between these two transitions, as well as their impact on other sectors, must be well understood. It is with this background that this session will focus on knowledge about the opportunities, challenges, and risks at the intersection of AI and climate change that resonates with both our shared global priorities and concerns, as well as specific considerations pertinent to Global South. We have a stellar panel for this session, and I look forward to an extremely insightful discussion. With this, I would like to invite the esteemed panel to the stage. Mr. Vilas Dhar, President and Trustee, Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. Ms. Sweta Kalluri, Head of Experimentation Accelerator Lab, UNDP. Dr. C.S. Murthy, Director, Malnobis National Crop Forecast Center. Dr. Lee Tydrick, Distinguished Faculty Fellow in Ethical Technology, Duke University. Mr. Gaurav Godwani, Co-founder and Executive Director at Civic Data Lab. And Dr. Urvashi Aneja, Founder, Digital Futures Lab.
You okay? You need a minute? Cool. Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct, in 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. Think of all the other things you could do with that money. Around the world, people are living in poverty. Don't you think helping them would make more sense than, I don't know, paying for the demise of your entire species? Let me be real for a second. You've got a huge opportunity right now. As you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic, this is humanity's big chance. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Shweta, for that extremely visual video. Now I invite Mr. Dhar to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, everyone. A delight to be here with you. I have to tell you, I've been working in AI for over 2 decades. I've been building solutions. But as I've walked through the expo and met some of these students that are pushing the frontiers, sometimes I feel like that dinosaur that's on stage. It's a little bit unsettling, kind of amazing. Look, I want to thank you all for being here this morning. I want to thank the government of India for its leadership here at GPI. I want to thank our amazing experts, in particular Urvashi Aneja. I want to thank UN Tech Envoy Amandeep Gill, who joins us here in the audience, and to all of you, to talk about what I feel is an interesting convergence of 2 public conversations that share some amazing similarities. On one side, to this audience, I don't need to say much, the moment of potential promise and challenge that we face with artificial intelligence. The second, a conversation that I haven't seen enter these halls too much yet, the fact that we face a climate crisis that will address the challenges and risks faced by communities all across the planet. We convene here just a few days after the final resolution of the COP proceedings happening in the United Arab Emirates. In many ways, there have been a number of headlines that have talked about some of those high-level outcomes around fossil fuels, around basic sort of decisions about what kind of future we want to face. But in today's conversation, I want to bring us to a key realization I had while I was there. That as we moved from first conversations about scientific truth, then to intention, then to action, we face an amazing opportunity but also a gap around specifically those decision-making systems informed by data, colored by predictive analytics, driven by the potential of AI that let governments, private sector actors, and individuals make better decisions about our own carbon footprint, about the kinds of behaviors we can change that lead to a macro outcome that protects the planet, protects economic opportunity, protects the dignity of communities around the world. So in our time together today, I'd like to share with you three thoughts. First, to give you a sense of what we're seeing in the world that excites me about the opportunities for where predictive analytics, AI, can exchange and involve itself directly in our decision-making processes and drive amazing ROI. Second, to color that optimism with a very clear sense that we face significant structural barriers in the deployment of these tools, things that come to the very core of what we've talked about here at GPI. And I'll go into more detail, but to give you a sense ranging from the fact that we lack public infrastructure to extract some of these benefits, all the way through to the representation of those very communities in the design and creation of these tools. And finally, I'll share with you three very high-level ideas that we might begin to think about in ways that this group in particular might contribute to an AI-enabled climate transition. And then with that, I'm going to sit down and learn from our amazing panel as they share the work that they're doing in thinking about this. So let's start with the first. I think one of the things that has emerged in the last 12 months alone is the incredible power that emerges when you take raw data that exists about climate and about geospatial intelligence and put it into decision-making environments that are guided by the power of generative AI. I'll give you one example. I recently sat with our partners as we saw the first Earth model they built that integrates an LLM with the predictive analytics engine. And I'll tell you what it lets you do. It lets you look at something that looks a lot like a Google Earth version of the planet. Geospatial intelligence in near real time that's giving you granular information about everything from methane emission to new developments that are happening at the heart of our most treasured forests and rainforests. And as I was looking at this, they took me and they zoomed me into a part of South America, and they showed me what an artisanal gold mine looks like. Now, artisanal it's a little bit of a fake term, right? An artisanal gold mine truly is an illegal gold mine, one that doesn't follow basic standards about safety or practice, often heavily polluting, often ones that create massive negative externalities. Now, these artisanal gold mines are often very hard to find and to stop. They're created very quickly. They're brought in kind of chemicals and other things that are required for mining, and often they're so easy to disassemble and move that before a government's made aware of their presence, they move to a different location. Using real-time data and an LLM system, you can actually go in and you can say, you know what, I now know that this one looks like this, and they have a characteristic shape, often a Y shape that's driven by where chemicals can be placed next to each other. Using a mouse, you can draw out what that looks like from geospatial pictures. You see a clearing with a characteristic shape. And then you can type in, show me any other site that looks like this that's appeared in geospatial scans of this area over the last 4 months. And within 4 seconds of putting in that query, the system returned 32 different sites that had shown up. Now, taking that information and passing it to a government or a law enforcement agency and saying, here's where you should be targeting potential interdiction efforts. Or maybe even more critically, passing it to our partners from the indigenous community, who are frontline Earth defenders that are often the first people that are able to show up and stop this kind of activity. Gives us a sense of the possible power of what happens when you take data that we've had a long time, but put it into a decision-making engine that gives us this kind of granular, clear, actionable outcome. Now, I can take that example and I can give you many more, but let me instead give you a few categories of what I'm incredibly excited by. One is shifting from the idea that decisions around climate need to be made by nation states, and instead moving to subnational actors, states, cities, regional communities, and making sure that they're enabled with these kinds of precision tools that let them become true stewards of their local biodiversity and ensure that they're both intervening on illegal activity, but also able to make decisions about how their own citizens are engaging with climate-based effects. In a totally different domain, I think about reducing the burden of corporate net zero accounting. Something that I'm sure many of us have heard about, a move to making private sector organizations accountable for how they're creating carbon effects through their entire supply chain. Well, today, I think good actors in that space are modeling for us what that behavior looks like. Increased data capacity, the use of generative models to ensure that what's coming out of that data is being used effectively. But what we really need is to shift the disclosure process from a one-way mechanism where companies report their data to one where those activists, advocates, and civil society actors that are holding accountability and then holding these firms accountable have an integrated data and an AI environment in which to do that. Certainly early warning systems and disaster resilient systems that are driven by AI. In a project that we have the great pleasure of doing under the UN Secretary General's leadership called DISHA, we use data that comes from a variety of sources, including telecom data, to understand how people move, look for resources, and deal with times of extreme conflict and crisis. We use that data to develop early warning systems, mechanisms by which we say if we're expecting significant flooding across an urban area, how do we make sure that we're stepping into those environments early, creating relief systems, and making sure that after a conflict, we know how to best deliver aid to let people get through the very worst of a moment. But not stop there. With our civil society partners, including the Red Cross, we built systems that allow us to do satellite or overflight-based damage assessment to ensure that we can take a timeline that traditionally has been 3 to 6 months after a family, unfortunately, might lose their home before they can get government relief, to turn that into a process that happens within hours. Using geospatial data, using AI-based systems that review that using machine learning, and are able to deliver recommendations within hours of what kind of damage has happened, rebuilding costs, and mechanisms by which local governments might go in and actually support this rebuilding process. Modeling weather systems, a classic public good problem. One where some countries that have extreme capability around this have built models that are supposed to cover the entire world, but often miss communities, particularly in isolated or geographically distant areas. So thinking about how we can build new data environments that allow monitoring and geospatial intelligence that's coming out of national oceanic and atmospheric administrations to actually create open data sets that let civil society actors step in and begin to build products that deal with the specific needs of specific communities. And finally, the last one, but one of my favorites. Over the past few years, we've worked with an organization called Climate Trace in close partnership with Vice President Al Gore. Climate Trace is an incredible story of how AI is being used by civil society without having to rely on large-scale tech companies. It's a collaboration of hundreds of nonprofit organizations that have committed to sharing information about emissionality. And in doing so, have built the most comprehensive real-time database in the world that shows us where illegal, unauthorized, or even authorized emissions of methane and CO2 are happening. For years in the development of this process, we were looking at data sets that began in the thousands of data points, moved to the hundreds of thousands of data points, and at COP, we announced that the database now includes 300 million different data points across the planet around emissionality. What this means is if you're a government, a private sector company, or an individual who's making a choice about what kind of products you're going to buy, you can now go into the system and you can track the entire supply chain and understand the carbon effects and potentially the behaviors of the firms you're transacting with and give you the agency to make your own carbon choices. These are the kinds of tools that AI is enabling. Now, I promised you that I wouldn't give you just the rosy version, right? If you know me at all, you know I'm a great optimist about the power of these tools. But that optimism has to be balanced by a commitment to intentionality, to making sure that when we step into a conversation about AI, we start from a set of values, norms, and principles that guide how these tools will be used, and we make sure that our decisions are driven by those values. I think we have some real structural barriers as we think about the potential of AI for climate. The first is the fact that we have very little insight into model explainability, particularly around large-scale climate effects. Now, this isn't merely an AI issue. This is an issue around our underinvestment in climate science and our underinvestment in the translation of core science into these technological developments that we're building. Attached to that, I think we really have to focus on the idea that these tools are driven by and trained on diverse and representative data sets. This has become, I think, a very much a common sense and known topic for the people in this room. But let me add one additional domain that I don't think has been spoken about so clearly. We should acknowledge that the data that's training any number of these models, including in the climate space, are trained on commercially available data sets that have often been collected because of their commercial value. What it means is firms have said, you know, it would be great if we had this, let's spend some money to build it. Now, what that creates, though, is a vacuum. A lacuna around what about those data sets that reflect the needs and experiences of populations that don't have a commercial viability attached to them? Who's investing in building those data sets and ensuring that we understand with the same level of granularity what happens when a hurricane hits Manhattan as what happens when sea level rise threatens the Marshall Islands? There's an incredible opportunity here for public funding to come in and build new representative data sets that reflect these stories. I think we have a challenge around the cost of compute. We've talked a lot about it over the last 3 days, and I'll spare you more on that. But I think one of the things that we are considering at the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation is how we invest in the creation of compute resources, particularly for small island nations, those particularly at the front lines of vulnerability around things like sea level change, sea level rise, and climate change. And finally, I think a favorite topic for many of us, but one that we still need to engage with as a structural barrier, the siloed action of players in this space. The fact that even when you go to COP, you see incredible advocacy organizations that are working with deep knowledge and understanding of the climate issues involved, but operating in an artificial distance from the organizations that understand how AI models can be built to create real and meaningful solutions. Building bridges between the competency and the frontline lived experience of communities and technological capacity should be at the core of our agenda here in these GPAY meetings over the next year of real solutions development, and really as we think about a broader regime for how we think about governance for AI. Let me close with 3 ideas and thoughts. As we take kind of this sense of what's possible with AI, balance it with the public investments we need to make in creating infrastructure for it, and think about what specifically we might do. First, we work closely with climate advocacy organizations that have come to us to share the need for a new form of data licensing that allows us to integrate every piece of climate data on the planet, from proprietary and privately held geospatial intelligence in real time, all the way through to citizen-reported effects of climate change in their own neighborhoods, in their own homes. This data exists, but it doesn't exist yet in ways that allow us to train workable models or to draw real, clear, decisionable insights that actually allow us to both drive policy, but also to drive practice and intervention. Second, I think thinking about how we bring existing policy and disclosure frameworks around climate and net zero transition into a space where the tools of AI can be used to drive meaningful sector-level adoption. It's great that we have leading organizations that are doing this, often driven by their investor communities, often in incredibly dense investor packets that sometimes are put on websites and rarely accessed. If we could take data not just about carbon and net zero outcomes, but also about the interventions that these firms are using to reduce those effects, tie them to investment mechanisms, and redirect global financing flows to lead to the most impactful and outcome-producing firms, that could be a transformative change. And finally, the fact that we exist in a world where much of this technical innovation, by virtue of capital, by virtue of public consensus, lives in closed private sector technology organizations. I don't think any of us in the room today would say they shouldn't be the ones who own it, but we have to create new policy instruments that create openness around these tools, that allow for those civil society organizations that are at the front lines of need to access the capacity, the compute, the talent, and the data they need in order to build the solutions that actually matter for all of us. With that, I'll leave you then with a general message of hope. We're here in the end of 2023, going to 2024. We have a number of examples, many of them driven by the expert community here at GPI, that allow us to say this is not a hypothetical conversation. This is one where real, tangible outcomes are not just possible, but absolutely critical. In order to get there, what it takes is the action of the people in this room to say, let's figure out how to bridge these two communities. Let's figure out how to invest and bring public investment into building these solutions, and let's center community-based frameworks in the design of them. With that, thank you very much. I'm eager to learn from the panel, and thank you, and looking forward to questions and conversation. Urvashi?
Thank you, Dr. Dhar, for so articulately expanding and identifying both the potential and challenges of using AI in climate change. I now hand it over to Urvashi to take over the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Very good morning. My name is Urvashi Aneja. I am the founder and director of Digital Futures Lab. We are a public policy think tank that looks at the societal impacts of emerging technologies in India and other parts of the global south. I'm very delighted to be here. Thank you to the GPI organizers. Thank you to all of you for being here. I think this is a very, very critical conversation to look at the intersection of AI and climate action, one that has not so far received a lot of attention, but I'm very happy to see that GPI is putting it on the agenda, and it's part of also what the working groups are working on. Over the past year at Digital Futures Lab, we have been looking at the intersection of AI and climate action in Asia. Digitalization, digital transformations, and climate are two of perhaps the biggest forces or biggest drivers that are going to shape the future of the Asian continent. Yet, we know very little about what this intersection looks like. This intersection, or the twinning of these two factors, is still at a very early stage as well. So we have an opportunity to shape the trajectory of how AI and climate action come together, to identify the ways in which we can use AI to drive positive action, as well as to be cognizant of the harms that AI might produce or the risks of it, and to avoid harmful technology lock-ins or policy lock-ins. Supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, we set up an expert group of experts across Asia from 9 Asian countries, and we've been looking at the use of AI in 3 sectors: in agriculture, in power systems, and in disaster response. What are the opportunities? What are the kind of use cases that we see? And where do we really see the potential in the years going forward? But as Vilas also pointed out, it's not a one-way street. The use of AI also comes with a number of challenges, a number of risks that we need to navigate in order to leverage the possibility of AI effectively. I think one of the biggest ones, which Vilas already alluded to, is trying to bring these communities together, bring the communities working on climate action and working on AI together. Currently, what we see is that these two communities work in silos, that we don't have enough interdisciplinary platforms or interdisciplinary expertise around these areas, and that's something we really need to grow in the Asia-Pacific region. We also, see challenges around financing. There's a number of pilots that use AI, there's a number of initiatives that use AI to drive positive climate action, including those that are based at the community level that have a huge amount of potential. But unless we create the financing mechanisms to convert these pilots into a long-term sustainable strategy, there's a risk and a real opportunity lost that they just end at pilots. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm delighted to have a fantastic set of panelists to help us think through these questions. We'll have a set of opening remarks from the panelists, and we'll have about 15 minutes at the end for questions for the panelists, including for Vilas. So please do file away your questions, and we'll come to you at the end. Dr. Murthy, perhaps I can start with you. You've been working in the space of looking at the role of AI, the role of data in building more resilient and climate ready agricultural systems and improving the resilience of agriculture to climate variability. Could you tell us a little bit about your work, please?
Good morning to all of you, and first of all, I thank profusely the organizers of this event for giving us an opportunity. Yeah, so I represent the National Crop Forecast Center. We are the Geospatial Technology Center of Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India. So now, based on the context set up in this particular event, so you all agree that agriculture sector is an important sector that is being impacted by the climate change or climate variability all over the globe, whether it is a developed nation or developing nations. And incidentally, this is one sector where there is a lot of opportunities to generate data-driven solutions for decision making. Today, the Indian agriculture, I'm just focusing on this because we are working very closely with the systems here. It requires the decision-making process needs to be strengthened with the new data, new tools, new information, new knowledge. We have to align our agriculture to climate change and climate resilient goals. So this is an important aspect what we are looking. So how do we generate the new solutions is that numerous data is available on crops today, particularly the geospatial solutions. You know, every 5 days we are getting the satellite images of 10-meter spatial resolution, and also in some cases 5-meter spatial resolution. and its frequency is every 5 days. Granularity is quite adequate to monitor the crops very closely. So there are proven crop health indicators. We can detect the changes, what is happening at field scale level using these satellite data. I think this is the biggest opportunity. And down the line in the next 2 to 3 years, many satellite companies are coming up with new data sets. And our weather data sets, weather instrumentation is increasing all over the globe. So a lot of weather data sets are available. And the smartphones, they provide a huge opportunity to report the crop condition at field level, at field scale level. So, and then the devices, IoT devices, very low cost devices to monitor the changes in the temperature at microclimate, at soil and soil moisture levels. So with all this huge amount of data, there are huge opportunities to develop new solutions in agriculture to support the decision making from farmers to policy makers. So this is possible to that the data driven and evidence based solutions in agriculture sector. So I just put 3 perspectives here. So one is that there is huge scope to strengthen crop surveillance systems in the country, develop some kind of agriculture intelligence, data driven intelligence. And then the crop risk management solutions, timely relief from the disasters. And the risk transfer mechanism, there is scope to develop very good customized farmer friendly crop insurance products, because the climate risks are increasing to the farmers, and these climate risks are very localized. This is one important area. There is a lot of scope. I just pick up one example for you, the picture based insurance that is based on the smartphone base. This is an emerging technology. It's a typical AI solution. A picture based solution, farmer himself can upload the photographs and give an evidence that the crop has suffered losses. I think down the line in the next 2 to 3 years, these farmer centric crop risk management solutions will gain a lot of importance. This is one aspect. The third important aspect I just summarized is that planning purpose. In India, there is a need to redesign the cropping systems to align with the climate change. So here, for this planning purpose, a lot of geospatial solutions are possible, because a lot of data is available for the current and past years. A lot of resources database, weather, climatology, and then the soil resources. So huge opportunities for GIS solutions to design the cropping systems to align with current climate resilient agriculture. I think in brief, what I say is that the opportunities are plenty. Now already some use cases are there. Transformational changes are happening in Indian agriculture. Already there are some use cases. We are mainstreaming those use cases into the system of decision making. One important thing is that completely remote sensing based crop insurance solution is being implemented in one of the states. It is a fantastic example to emulate for other states and other nations. So I think I will stop at this. So the list is very wide, but because of the paucity of time, I will stop it at this point of time.
Thank you, Dr. Murthy. I wanted to ask you one follow-up question. One of the things that we've seen in our research looking at the intersection of AI and climate, particularly in the agricultural space, is that obviously agroclimatic zones vary considerably. What is a climatic zone here sitting in Delhi is very different from the zone in Ghaziabad or Faridabad. So even in the same pin code, you can have a great variation. And so we need to combine satellite data with ground truthing. We need to collect that local data on the ground. So could you tell us a little bit about that? What does that process look like? What are the kind of finances that are required? Do you see that kind of effort already being made in the Indian context to build those localized data sets for agriculture?
Yeah, basically, in the Indian context, the heterogeneity of the cropping systems or cropping practices is quite significant. The agroecological zones which were defined long back based on the resources climatology at that point of time, I think there is a need to relook at the agroecological zonation. All the AI-based solutions, they should be localized. So the solution developed for one crop growing environment, you cannot simply translate or replicate in other crop growing environment. This is one important thing. A simple crop mapping, I tell you, the crop signatures that are generated in Maharashtra state, you cannot apply the same signatures in Punjab and Haryana, because the crop vigor, the progression of the crop is altogether different. Therefore, these AI-based solutions should be localized, and then the local data sets play a very important role here. the local climate variability data sets are very variable because one important example, you see the hailstorms. In some regions, it occurs very frequently. The damages are very high because the same hailstorm model that you apply in Maharashtra, it is not applicable in somewhere else. So local data sets will play a very, very important role here. So when we go for developing these kind of solutions, so generation of good data sets is one of the important challenges, but it is a doable thing.
What do you think gets us to creating those localized data sets? Is it a question of finance? Is it a question of policy support? How do we build those localized data sets?
Basically, all these data sets are AI-based solutions right now. These are low-cost solutions. They don't involve. But the only thing is that from the policy-making side, there should be a data policy. The way the data is collected, the data is standardized and maintained, and this is to be done in a collective manner. All the stakeholders. Right now, numerous data is available in agriculture. Numerous data, I can say millions of data points are available, but this data is available at silos. They are not standardized. This is the most important thing, and I think with an efforts of just 1 or 2 years, we can bring the standardized data into a centralized platform. I think that is one of the initiatives what we are doing at the Ministry of Agriculture. This is one important thing. Because the data is available at different places, all the people working in AI solutions, their data access is a major limitation. They have the knowledge how to build the model, but they don't have the data, right data. They don't have the training the data. They don't have the data for validation of their models. So this is the biggest limitation, and I think this needs to be overcome.
1 or 2 years sounds like a pretty reasonable horizon to solve this, so that gives me a lot of hope. Shweta, maybe I can bring you in here. You've been doing a lot of work at UNDP, looking at the intersection of AI and climate, whether it's in agriculture, monitoring air pollution. Could you tell us a little bit about your work, please?
Sure, thank you. Firstly, thanks to the organizers for inviting me here. It's a very good opportunity to present our points of view, and there's a very rich multi-stakeholder environment. So congratulations to the organizers for doing this, and at the same time, thanks for the opportunity. I come from an interesting initiative within UNDP called the UNDP Accelerator Labs. Of course, we see a lot of labs here. There's a civic data lab, there's a futures digital lab. So I come from the Accelerator Labs. So about 4 years back, UNDP started asking questions on, how do we accelerate the progress towards SDGs? How do we do things differently, right? And how do we stay relevant, and also how do we innovate with the 21st century solutions? Because some of the solutions, some of the methods are age-old. So how do we have 21st century solutions? So with that sort of a thought process came these accelerator labs to do development differently. So we are not one lab or two, we are a network of 91 labs across 100 countries. And we are networked in a very interesting way, wherein anything new or innovative that emerges in any lab is transmitted across all the labs. And all these are in the global south. So it's a very powerful network to transmit innovations, new ideas, and technologies across the global south and for South-South cooperation. So once this network was set, of course, the lab started thinking differently, and a couple of us also came up with interesting innovations in AI. For instance, our lab in Argentina has started working around looking into the public opinion of AI from various citizens' data, social media data, and etc., which is feeding into the AI strategy. There is another lab in Serbia which is looking into the gender bias in the image generators. We have a lot of image generators, AI-based image generators these days, DALL-E, Midday, and so on and so forth. So is there a gender bias when it comes to certain professions? For example, when you search for an image of an engineer or a mathematician, you always get a man, right? So is there a bias there? And surprisingly, there was a huge bias in the image generation. In India, we are a little bit obsessed with climate action. Like you have seen in the video before, of course, our lab did not make it, but it's a wonderful one. And the primary reason is because, climate change is one of the most complex challenges that humanity is facing today, and it questions our very basic fundamental aspects of survival, right? Do we survive or not? And for this reason, we have been looking at this problem from various lenses. And sitting in Delhi, of course, you cannot ignore the problem of air pollution. We are in the air pollution season. I hope everybody is coping up well. Please do wear masks when you have to go out. So this air pollution, if you see, comes from so many different sources, right? And it's a complex one. There are like millions of agents and entities that are causing air pollution, and there are millions of people who are breathing this. So it's a tricky one. So here we started looking into one of the sectors called brick manufacturing units. So this is an informal economy, very difficult to regulate these kind of industries because you don't know where they're present. They're usually scattered in huge geographies of land, difficult to regulate or difficult to implement sort of development solutions. So when you talk to all the stakeholders, they said, well, we know that brick kilns are important sources of air pollution, but we don't know where they are, right? Or how many are they? So this is one problem where we started looking in, and we collaborated with a university in UK called the University of Nottingham, and together we built a GeoAI platform, which did not take much long, perhaps less than 6 months. We were able to spot all the 47,000 hotspots of air pollution in the northern and eastern part of India. Now, once we did that, we thought, okay, we have Eureka, we have done this. See, we have the evidence that these are the locations, and we have achieved 96% accuracy. Wonderful, right? But when we went back to the various stakeholders, including government agencies, environmental regulators, they said, oh, this is wonderful, thank you. We've been waiting for this kind of intelligence, new intelligence and data. But then this number is very huge, and we don't have the capacities to look into all the 47,000. So then we came up with more AI, like added more neural networks and convolutional neural networks, which basically classify, you know, some tech companies have been using CNNs to classify cats and dogs or different breeds of dogs. So same algorithms, but we started classifying these brick manufacturing units based on their compliance and their spatial layout. And then we have arrived to much smaller number, which is now a doable one for the regulators to act upon. So AI here, in this case, is a powerful enabler, but of course not the end solution, right? Because there are issues of capacities, then there are, you know, you can't just shut the shop. There are so many people, especially vulnerable communities, who are working in these areas. So it's a very tricky development challenge for which AI has brought in the new intelligence. It's a good enabler, but then there's a long way to go to find the end solution. Another example, if I can, another example which we've been applying AI, not because AI is available, but because our stakeholders, you know, our partnering organizations were facing this sort of a challenge, was that in agriculture, like Dr. Murthy has mentioned, so there are many challenges related to climate resilience aspects in agriculture. We all want climate resilient agriculture, but what does it mean? How to demystify that? And we've also seen that many stakeholders are, you know, working in their own data silos. So one key ask was, how do you break these data silos and make some sort of a digital commons that all the stakeholders in the agri ecosystem can leverage on? So then we came up with a solution called DICRA, Data and Climate Resilient Agriculture. It's a digital platform, and it leverages a lot of satellite data. There's a treasure of satellite data. We were chatting with Dr. Murthy before how Landsat in 2008 came up with this revolutionary act of making the satellite data open, right? So that has opened up a lot of the economy. And then followed by European Space Agency and the Copernicus program, which again made many more data sources open. So we have leveraged some of these data sources because just those satellite images or the data products that are sitting there don't make sense to the agriculture ecosystem. There's a long way between the kinds of data that is available and the evidence-based mechanisms. So data-driven mechanisms. So in that case, we have taken this and we have brought in a community of data scientists together who have then analyzed the data and started producing various insights. Now, these insights run in so many different directions. We are looking into climate resilience, looking into these long-term trends as to what has been working well, over long periods of time and what is not. Because you also have a huge community of farmers who are innovating on the ground and doing something differently, right? So over long horizons of time, not everything is going bad, right? We see that crop fires have been increasing overall at the state level, but you disaggregate, go down to some pockets. Well, some pockets you see that crop fires are going down, right? And the soil organic carbon is improving tremendously. So what are those pockets doing well? So what are those farmers thinking about their microclimate? How are they coping up? So we have then sent teams to learn from those farmers, bottom up, in order to feed into policies as to what has been working well, so that we inform the policies and generalize them into some of the policy instruments. This came in the form of a digital public good eventually. I mean, open source is great, but digital public goods are even better, right? Because there is a long evaluation that goes in. And one important factor that digital public goods ecosystem does is they see if the product is doing any harm or not. Because as Urvashi mentioned, there are a lot of benefits of AI, but you should also look into the risks. And at the UN and the UNDP, we have very strong metrics on doing no harm. It, in fact, overweighs doing good. So we have to balance both. Hence, digital public goods was a good ecosystem for us to participate in. We got accredited, and we're seeing very interesting adoption across the agriculture ecosystem in this particular case. And this also shows that, you know, although we, many times in agriculture, we try to give advisories top-down, as if the entire knowledge is sitting only with the agriculture research institutions, but that's not the case. Farmers have been like the original experimenters for perhaps, I mean, it's a very long profession, right? This occupation has been there for more than 10,000 years. Yeah, 10,000 years, right? So farmers have been experimenting quite a lot, and there is a lot of indigenous knowledge that needs to be tapped in. So here we flipped the question through the digital public good, and then started collecting those insights from the ground up, while also applying AI from the top down. So it's a combination of both. And finally, when people ask us, but all of this is sitting on your geospatial platforms, how do farmers benefit out of it? For us, the real concern is, well, farmers is not like one monolithic group. There are so many subcategories within farmers. There are some who are very proactive, leveraging all these digital instruments. But there's a huge group of farmers, perhaps 70%, especially the women farmers, who are usually not recognized as farmers, but as farm labor, right? But they are the ones who are actually acting on the field and working quite a lot. So next we are developing a regenerative AI, LLM and generative AI technology to reach out to those women farmers and see how they can leapfrog in the digital economy and participate in the digital economy, especially in the agriculture space. So this is a use case which is coming up. It is not there yet, but this is one segment that we want to really address in terms of reaching these cutting-edge AI technologies to the small farmers and women farmers in particular. And we do all of this through collaborations. Nothing is just developed by UNDP alone. We do this in a huge collaborative environment, bringing the civil society together, bringing the government stakeholders, other multilaterals, and most importantly, the community, the farmer-producer organizations themselves. This is our way of working. We have seen that AI is giving a lot of advantage in terms of cost, in terms of efficiency, so on and so forth. I think that has been discussed quite a lot in multiple forums here. But what we have seen also is AI, when combined with the openness and the open source approach, can be a multiplier, and it can bring collective climate action. So this is where we are pegging our bets more and more. Thank you.
Thanks, Reza. I just wanted to ask you one follow-up question, also kind of reflecting on some of the conversations we've had previously. There is a lot of satellite data available. There is a lot of localized data sets that we're building, like Professor Murthy alluded to. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make this data ready for AI, right? There's a lot of data processing work. You require interdisciplinary expertise. one conversation that I had with you some months ago, which really stuck in my head, was also the different kind of expertise that you require in terms of machine learning and remote sensing technologies, and that you have the only people in India apparently on your team who can do that work. So just a few, I mean, we are a bit short on time, but just a few sentences on that kind of data work and the intensity of that data work and what it takes to actually go from this promise to then realizing the possibilities of that data.
Sure, thanks. So I think this is where our approach around data collaboratives come in. Not everything is done just in-house within UNDP. It's not like a lab, a physical structure that we have wherein we sit with a, 4 or 5 data scientists and make all these things. In fact, it is a distributed capacity. Because in the collaborative, we partner with research labs sitting in Netherlands. There are some research labs like the IITs in India. So these are like the distributed capacities that we leverage in order for this to happen. And all of this is just not like partnership for the sake of it, not for the optics, but it is working partnership. We work as, let's say, a seamless team of data scientists and also agriculture scientists and farmers and users all put together in a collaborative environment, and thanks to platforms like GitHub that can make it happen. Yeah.
Shweta. I was just asking that question also because I feel sometimes we don't pay enough attention to the actual work that goes into making these solutions work and the real resources and human effort that is required. So thank you for that. Gaurav, perhaps I can bring you in here. You run Civic Data Lab. You are in some sense at the forefront of the open data movement in India. You've been doing a lot of work around disaster response, around climate adaptation. Could you tell us a little bit about your work? And I know you wanted to show a slide as well.
Yeah, we can present that in a minute.
Sure.
But let's just check if we have everyone in the audience with us meanwhile. So I would do a quick poll just to see we all are here. So please raise your hand if you or your loved one have been directly affected by any form of a natural hazard or a extreme weather event like flood, air pollution related issues, cyclones, storms, landslides. Do you think these extreme weather events have increased in last decade? The occurrences of these events have increased in last decade. Now, do you think we have enough data to understand these events and prepare for it? The number of hands are going down. So there is a more need to unlock data sets related to extreme weather events. And we at Civic Data Lab have been thinking around how we can create a resilient climate data ecosystem where we unlock some of these crucial data sets and work with several stakeholders to improve government's preparedness, our collective community preparedness towards extreme weather events, because as we all know, the number of occurrences of extreme weather events have increased drastically over the last decade. And Asia particularly is witnessing much more of these. There is a 80% rise in the extreme weather events in just last couple of years. So what we're going to discuss today is a case study from Assam, which is in the northeastern region of India. Thanks to the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, we did a pilot there in 2021 and 2022, where we tried to see 5 data sets which generally don't talk to each other. The satellite and weather data, which was discussed by Dr. Murthy as well as Shweta here. Bhuvan just released just few days back Bhunidhi, which is 5-meter resolution satellite imagery data. So now more and more such data sets are accessible to us. The question is what we can do with it. Second is the demographic data. So census data, economic surveys, all other data sets which are collected from several surveys in India. How can we utilize them to understand government preparedness on some of these issues? Losses and damages data. With COP28, there is a much more focus on loss and damages. But what is the kind of data sets available to really understand losses and damages? So what we realized in Assam, there is a very strong network of community members gram buddhas, or what we call in English village elderlies, who have the tacit knowledge of where these disasters are happening and how much damage is happening when we witness these extreme weather events. So through mobile apps, through SMS, they collect all of this information and share with the Assam State Disaster Management Authority on a daily basis that this is the damage happened in the village level. And this gets published as open data, which you can access as a day-wise data set available on their website. We are working with them to create open data APIs so that this could be plugged in data models like what we have built. And access to public infrastructure, critical public infrastructure, like where is the nearest hospital, where is the nearest highway, where is the nearest shelter. All of this data set, if we can collate, we have a wonderful platform known as PM Sadak, which collates all of this data at one place. How can we leverage that for understanding disaster preparedness? And lastly, government fiscal response. So through our long-standing partnership with the government of Assam, they became the first state to open up their budget data as well as day-wise public procurement data in public domain. It's already available on data.gov.in, which is India's national open data platform. So they became the first state to release this data. We thought, can we look into flood-related procurements, which is the largest amount of procurement which is happening in this region because Assam is every year affected by floods. Can we see the procurement which are done before the flood season, during the flood season, and after the flood season for restoration and response-related efforts? So combining all these data sets, we were able to create this. This is an intelligent data solution for disaster risk reduction, a platform which is now being deployed thanks to the support of the Rockefeller Foundation by Government of Assam in their Assam State Disaster Management Authority Center, and would be enabling district-level disaster management authorities, 35 of them exist in Assam, to see what is the state of risk, disaster risk, in that particular month for that particular district, and the revenue circles. Revenue circles are the smallest administrative unit in the region. We have got 180 of them in Assam. So seeing what are those high-risk revenue circles, where the effort needs to be mobilized, and where we can have some long-term resilience. So this model we are able to update on a monthly basis, and now we are building capacity of district disaster management authorities to adopt it. We have been already working with the State Disaster Management Authority for years now. How do we now get to the district level to start seeing this data on a regular basis so that the revenue circles which require attention, which require the procurement before the flood season, get the flood-related procurements done. And what we've observed in last 2 years is 95% of the state disaster relief budget is now moved towards some of these districts which require more attention on a timely basis. We are seeing for the first time Government of Assam in this financial year committed to a $2 billion green budget, becoming the third state in India to have a dedicated green budget statement. And this was also done in a data-driven manner where they went through all the schemes, all the welfare programs, and see how can we annotate and green tag some of these budgetary items and encourage more line departments to commit to new welfare schemes which are related to green and climate action plan. The climate action plan of the state is already passed in the assembly, so how do we realize that in terms of budget and audit cycle? And the biggest achievement what we have observed so far is the behavioral change that my fellow panelists were also talking about, that how do we create this data culture among the governments, among the civil societies, among academia to come together and discuss issues like extreme weather events on a regular basis. So Assam State Disaster Management Authority every Friday 9:30 a.m. opens up its door for anyone to just come in and discuss some of these data sets, discuss these data models with them so that they can improve their weekly planning, monthly planning, quarterly, yearly planning towards disaster risk reduction. That's the kind of cultural change which we are hoping could be scaled to other states. So with the support of Rockefeller Foundation, now we are moving to Odisha and Himachal Pradesh who have also shown interest to replicate some of these things there in their state disaster management authorities. And also, government of Thailand have reached out that if you're able to unlock these procurements in Assam, can we work with you to see if we can unlock these procurement data in Thailand as well, specifically with Bangkok Metropolitan Agency to improve flood resilience and response in the region. So those are the early findings which we have observed in this experiment. We are still learning. We are still co-creating this with several stakeholders. As Shweta mentioned, this can't be done by just one organization. It's a chain of partnerships which we have to facilitate and work with several stakeholders to come together and create a real digital public good which could be scaled and we can learn from each other in a sustainable manner. So that's what we have been able to do so far. I would pause here and see you, Urvashi, if you have anything else.
Yeah, thanks, Gaurav. I think that's a really fascinating and inspiring example of like real change. And what really strikes me about the example that you mentioned is the partnership with the government and the continued kind of collaboration, because it seems like that's really key in actually turning something that is a pilot or like a civil society initiative into a long-term strategic program that is eventually owned by government. And that I guess is also my follow-up question to you. We see a lot of open source initiatives, we see a lot of civil society activity, we see a lot of philanthropic investments in this space as well. How do we ensure that they all come together, that they're kind of tied in together to a long-term political vision for climate action? Because that is eventually what we will need. The technology is only one part of is a tool to get there.
I think a couple of things. Number one is we really need to understand where our local actors are prioritizing their efforts. In our case, we really looked into the state level climate action plan which was passed by the assembly and found opportunities where data could be unlocked. Second is working with these stakeholders to create a responsible data ecosystem. So working on adopting things like open contracting data standard, a data standard which has been globally developed for public procurement data. How can we bring it to India? How can we convince the state governments to adopt that and show them the benefits and show them what are the KPIs which could be created from these data standards. So working closely with them to build their capacity to see some of these things. Then only they become more comfortable to start budgeting for it because then there are obvious benefits for them to monitor some of these things. Third one is when we talk about data models, I think my team did a lot of to and fro sessions with the state government agency to really create trust in the data model, because they have been generating some of these insights manually. And their biggest question is, are we covering all the necessary variables? Are we having the right weightages? Every time we open up the model, there is a lot of discussion which the authorities get into, because they want to really know that is this covering all the corners possible to really ensure we are understanding the disaster risk in the region comprehensively. So keeping it open source, keeping it explainable, ensuring there is a regular dialogue so that these variables, weights don't become opaque, but become like a regular conversation and create that kind of a data culture within the authority. And lastly, it needs to be multidisciplinary. It needs to have different stakeholders come together. So our designers go and understand with the district disaster management authorities how the visuals need to be so that it's easy to navigate, the platform is easy to understand and go through. And once they start seeing changes on these things, that's where they feel more comfortable to invest. That's what we have learned so far. And we require a public-private partnership, and there is a huge role what philanthropic organizations, CSR, corporate social responsibility money, can do here to unlock value of pilots. And then multilateral agencies can come to help scale some of the regions which are slightly more risk-averse. So help them do pilots on a more sustainable manner. And once they start seeing some of these efficiency gains, they start to commit the budget. That's what we have observed in the region.
Thanks, Gaurav. I'm going to come to the audience in about 5 minutes after Lee's remarks, so if you want to just think of your questions. Lee, over to you. You're an expert at GPI. This is a subject that you've been looking closely at the GPI working group. Could you tell us a little bit about how GPI is thinking about this intersection of AI and climate action?
Yeah. No, thank you very much, and thanks to our organizers and hosts for giving me the opportunity to discuss our GPay work. So when the GPay expert group was formed, one of the things that was quickly realized is, like we said, we are at this twin transition. We are at an AI transition, and we were at a crucial point in terms of climate change. And one of the committees that was formed within the Responsible AI Working Group within GPay is what we call Project RAISE. It's the Committee for the Responsible AI Strategy for the Environment, and I'm one of the 3 co-leads of the Project RAISE. And our approach kind of mirrors what we've heard from a lot of my co-panelists, is that to address these twin crises, these twin transitions, it really requires a multidisciplinary approach. So kind of using the MEG structure within GPay, we have made a concerted effort to pull together experts from across different disciplines. So when we do our work, we bring together the environmental experts, the AI technology experts, legal and policy experts, and we also realize that these problems transcend borders. So we bring together experts from all the different regions, and we've recognized upfront with our work that we have to make sure that the Global South is included, and we've been very conscious about making sure that we have experts from the Global South. In terms of our work, and I invite you to look at our website for Project RAISE, because we have various different reports there, is we've divided it really into 2 work streams. We have our AI and climate work stream, and then also picking up on the intro video, we recognize that in addition to the climate crisis, we have a biodiversity crisis, that a lot of species are facing extinction, and we have a whole separate work stream on AI and biodiversity loss. And what our goal is with GPay is to come up with these actionable roadmaps to help countries, help organizations address the crises. So I'll just really briefly summarize some of our findings that cut across both reports. Picking up on the themes of the other co-panelists is, to solve these issues, we need access to a lot of reliable data. And the reports call out, the importance of making sure that we have data, that the data is representative of the populations, and also picking up on some of the points that were raised is that we need to have appropriate infrastructure to share the data, both in terms of making sure that we have standard formats, common APIs, so data can be exchanged, it can be done responsibly, so we're not compromising privacy, addressing the data justice concerns. And then one of the other projects we have within GPay is how do we do the contracting around data, because one of the things that we found is that without the appropriate contracting structures combined with the technical tools, people are not going to want to exchange data. Another key theme that comes up in both reports is the need for the infrastructure. Capitalizing on the benefits of AI is not going to happen unless we have a certain amount of investment in the infrastructure to be able to deploy the AI. Another key finding in our reports is the need for measurement techniques. Our reports talk a lot about some of the great case studies, and you've heard a lot about them today, on how AI can be used to address the climate change, address biodiversity loss. But as some of the recent press reports have highlighted, when you look at the consumption of large language models in terms of the amount of energy, water that they consume, that we have to be careful. We have to be conscious that we're not deploying AI in a way that exacerbates these crises. So we did a joint report with the OECD last year that we presented at COP27 that really underscored the need to come up with measurement techniques. And it highlights that we need to talk about measuring both the direct impacts, what are the consumptions of the LLMs, the consumptions of the system, but we also need to look at the indirect impacts. If we're using AI to increase fossil fuel exploration, that's not good. If we're using AI in a way that's going to increase consumption, so the Amazon trucks arrive 3 times a day at your house, that's not good. So, we need measurement techniques, and the measurement techniques, I think, can really then, this is where the multi-stakeholder approach is really key, can then feed into the policy recommendations. Like once you know how to measure, policymakers then can come up with standards for reporting, ways to hold parties accountable, because our research has also showed that there's a lot of reporting going on these days, but there's no consistent standard, which raises a lot of concerns about the greenwashing. And then the other thing that our report emphasizes is we have to take the global approach. We're very concerned that particularly when we talk about biodiversity loss, there are particularly adverse impacts on the global south, and that's not okay. And that's part of the reason why we try to bring the whole global community into our work. So going forward in 2024 with our work plan, what we're really hoping to do is bring the community together to try to really focus on the measurement issues. And, you know, part of what GPay can do is act as a convener and bring experts together and really try to get the best minds in the world to think about what are measurement techniques, how can we deploy this, how can we standardize them, because then that will help inform policy, it will help create some accountability measures. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Lee, and thank you for raising the point around the environmental impacts of the use of AI technologies, both in the development of it, the use of them, and then also in other sectors. But while you were speaking, when you were talking about like the number of Amazon deliveries, for an example, I was just struck by how complex this calculation challenge is, right? Because we're talking about like a whole of society calculation around the use of AI. So how do we go about thinking about this? Like, is there some way we can break this down into smaller nuggets that help us grasp how we would build those metrics?
Yeah, so if the report, which is on the website, and we did this report in collaboration with the OECD, talks about we need to look at this from the entire life cycle. And, you know, part of it is looking at the production phase, looking at, you know, how much environmental impact is there on producing all the chips that in the infrastructure to create that system. Then looking at, you know, the development and the deployment of the system, you know, how much water, how much electricity is being consumed, how can we come up with strategies for data centers that enable society to capitalize on the benefits but reduce the environmental impact. And then also looking at it in the phase of retirement of the systems. You know, how can we do that in an environmentally friendly way? How can we create or encourage the circular economy so we can recycle some of the techniques? And then I think on the measurement side, you know, we really, it's complicated, and that's why what we're trying to do is bring together all the great scientists in the world to help us do this, because you've got the direct impacts, you've got the indirect impacts. Then the question is also, you know, how do we differentiate the AI stack from the broader ICT stack so we can differentiate that? And I think, you know, it's really just a question of sort of breaking all of these systems down and then coming up with accounting or reporting mechanisms, because we want to be able to know whether an AI system is environmentally friendly, but then we have to be careful of not putting the infrastructure in the position where they're disclosing proprietary information, where they're disclosing information that could compromise global security, and that's where we need to come up with those reporting measures. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we really feel that GPay, you know, given its multi-stakeholder position, is in a position to help lead, you know, unite the experts around the globe to help address some of these issues and come up with concrete solutions.
Thanks, Lee. And I guess it also points to, you know, not letting the market alone determine the trajectory of AI innovation, because the stakes are very, very high. Like, how do we put public interest at the forefront of AI innovation?
And the one thing I would also just add is, you know, this issue is getting a lot of attention from policymakers. About a month ago, President Biden signed a really monumental executive order in the United States, and there's a whole section in the executive order focusing on looking at the intersection of AI and climate. And the EU reached their political agreement around the AI Act about a week or so ago, and there are provisions we expect will be in there also looking at these issues. So policymakers are calling for it.
I want to open it up for Q&A. We have about 15 minutes. Yes, okay, about 15 minutes. I see one question there. If there's another one, we'll take, okay, let's take this 3 as a cluster. If you could just introduce yourself and ask a succinct, brief question, please. And if you would like to indicate who the question is directed to, that's also helpful.
Yeah, my name is Rajgopal Tampi, my question is directed to GPEI member here. She spoke of data contracts, that are being negotiated. So data sharing is a very important aspect in the development of AI and fair AI and shared for all countries and people. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about what these data contracts are.
So one thing I would say is after this session, I'm going to be presenting at the Innovation and Commercialization Working Group and talking about our work there. But at the premise of this is that it's right now, if you look at software, you look at content, we have efficient contract mechanisms that enable quick transactions through various open source license agreements, through Creative Commons license agreements. And data is different from open source software. It's different from the typical Creative Commons content. I'm a big fan of all of that work. And what we need to do to facilitate responsible data sharing is, and encourage people to take advantage of the market opportunities and take advantage of the social good opportunities, is come up with a new set of standard contract terms that are geared toward data. And some of the issues that you need to address around data are different from what you need to address around copyright, which is the cornerstone of Creative Commons. How do you disclose information about the data provenance, the data lineage? Those are concerns that come up with respect to data. How do you define the rights with respect to the data? You allow the other party to use it for certain uses, for some uses, but not other uses. Then the data is being used to create new developments, trained algorithms. There are outputs to the algorithms. And the premise behind the work is we need to create contractual tools that can let parties decide how to efficiently allocate those types of rights and also efficiently allocate those types of liabilities associated with the data. And the current license structures that are generally available, whether it's open source, Creative Commons, are great for what they were intended for, but they're really not designed for data. So our project there is trying to encourage the community, facilitate the development of these new contracts that will facilitate efficient data sharing.
Thank you, Lee. There was two questions at the back. Okay, we'll come to you after those. Yeah, thank you.
My name is Peramal. I'm coming from South India. The question goes to Gaurav. The thing is, it's a recent cyclone about that in Chennai. So the prediction, the 2 days it was telling that it was, they said that it is moving towards that the Orissa side and it just goes. Suddenly it turned back and it came to that, finally it hit back, right? So here I would like to know what went into the wrong way of prediction. So because if I have a proper, I'm not the guy to understand anything about that AI core deep, because I'm coming from an electrical background. I can talk about the sensing system and other things. But if you could put some thought, because the people should get more confident on using AI. If I use that, yes, I'm getting a perfect things. So to get that confident level, where we are, is there any missing points or anything? Just I would like to know. Thank you.
So the bad news is AI can't help us predict extreme weather events extremely accurately. That's something which most of the prediction engines have again and again clearly articulated. With so many factors around environment, build density, especially urban pockets, how infrastructure is being developed here. Most of the prediction engines are struggling to clearly articulate that these are the areas which get affected in these particular hours, and this is how it would be. What we need on the other end is a long-term resilience models, which help us create long-term disaster risk resilience. And that's where we need to unlock some of these data sets and unlock some of these data sets around the extreme weather events like the Chennai floods, because we saw that Chennai flood happened few years back as well. And if you look into from that event till now, the number of data sets which we have to understand Chennai floods are still limited. They have not increased drastically for us to better understand urban flooding. And that's the case with other municipal corporations in India as well. We recently had a long discussion with Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation. So now we're working with these organizations to create a long-term data strategy to start monitoring some of these data sets, collecting these data sets, and also work with local communities to understand local vulnerabilities better, which is not currently being part of some of these solutions.
Thanks, Gaurav. There was a question at the back. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Brian Byrne. I am with the United States Agency for International Development. We just touched upon disaster resilient infrastructure. I would like to know if you are working with the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and more specifically, the 600 or so corporations that are aligned with it and through the UNDP and UNDDR, which have specific commercial interests in producing this kind of knowledge and the finances to back it. Thank you. If you could, I think there are at least 3 people on that stage that could address this.
Does anyone want to take the question? Shweta, would you like to?
Yes, I mean, programmatically we work very closely with the CDRI, the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, and we continuously produce like new knowledge products around how to cope up with disasters, and more importantly, how to improve the resilience and be better prepared, because the precautionary measures are more important than the immediate response at times. So, so I would like to put it there, but at the same time, on the artificial intelligence front, I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done in this particular space. We work with a couple of very interesting partners who have come up with AI mechanisms for DRR, and also mapping the infrastructure that is available and how they are impacted by various disasters. So there is actively some work going on in that space, but obviously more work needs to be done. At the international level, I think there is one dedicated team working on DRR aspects as well in a coalition with various parties. And there are some ideas to create sort of digital commons at the global level that can address many challenges for the global south. So yeah, things are underway. Thank you.
Thanks, Shweta. I think we have time for one more question. Yes, sir. Come to you.
Hello, I'm Bhavya from Vardhani, and just so that everybody spoke a lot on how AI can enable a lot of things, but I think this is an open question to the panel on the risks of, let's say, where AI can possibly displace existing climate, let's say, infrastructure, and basically what should AI not be used for, because I think that's very important to sort of temper the conversation and understand as well. Because we do a lot of work on AI in various domains, and problem selection or the misselection is a huge part of it. So yeah, that's the question. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is the first question that comes to my mind whenever I attempt some problem around AI. So I was very excited to hear that there are many like-minded people. So far, like in the examples I have quoted, we were looking mostly into non-PI data, right? Not personal information, looking only at the objects, natural resources, doing those predictions, and low-risk AI. But now we are gradually moving into the generative AI space. I was very cautious. There were at least 100 questions in my mind, which I was also bringing to the summit while attending various sessions. How do we safeguard the PI data, and how do we not do any harm? Because as I said before, do no harm precedes doing good, especially with this technology. It is powerful, but like you said, it's very risky as well. Of course, I'm brainstorming quite a lot on when we give these sort of powerful tools, let's say to women farmers in our case, who have very basic levels of literacy or probably no digital literacy, and many of them don't even own smartphones, right? So how would the advisory that we are giving be accepted? Shall we first start listening and sort of do deep listening to them, have like open-ended conversations with them before we attempt this sort of a problem? So these are some of the ways I've been thinking through. But yeah, I would like to express my solidarity on this question. Thanks.
There was one more question here.
Hello. Hi. My name is Gaurav Mahajan. Thank you all of you for sharing your thoughts on sustainability and the climate changes and how AI is evolving in a way to support in all of this. Just for a background, I'm a tech lawyer, but I'm also part of Green Cross UK and really extensively interested in ESG goals and all. So my question would particularly to Dr. Murthy, to Shweta, as well as to Gaurav, how, I mean, they want to manage themselves by answering this. The idea is that as a part of a larger sustainability initiatives, we also have industries, we also have corporate bodies, we also have infrastructure issues, right? So how AI is thinking on those lines? I know the climate is obviously a bigger issue. Air pollution is an issue, yes, but at the same time, how industries are trying to pollute and all those effects that are coming to people. On those lines, how, I mean, AI would be thinking of helping out, though I know it's more of a self-governance factor where the industries are supposed to deal with it, but then how AI is thinking of, you know, helping them out. Thank you.
Murthy, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, it is slightly difficult for me to answer this from legal perspective, but I can put it from the technology perspective. So today, a lot of data is available to many stakeholders. Of course, certain data sets are restricted in nature, they are not available. The key issue, what I am seeing is that my experience in the last 5-6 years, I call it a technology application risk. Because people are developing the solutions with wrong data sets. Very typical case is that if you want to build a farmer-centric solution, that means either farmer advisory, weather advisory, or pest advisory, or market advisory, you need to have very granular, standardized data. I think my personal observation is that this particular aspect is not much emphasized. With the available data, with the course resolution data, they are generating the solutions and providing. It's totally very, very risky. So because these kinds of application risks are there in developing the AI solutions, so what we have to see is that there should be some regulatory body to look into these things before we mainstream these solutions for adoption. So right now we are working on that, how to streamline these things, because a lot of people are developing AI solutions, but I am sure that all these solutions, they are not fit for mainstreaming. They are not fit for routine adoption. So this is one step we need to be very, very cautious.
Thank you. We are at time. Do we have a minute for another question? A quick one. Oh no, there was someone waiting behind you, so I'm going to let him have his turn.
Hi, I'm Marcus Peña. I'm from the International Council on Environmental Economics and Development. We are a research UN think tank. We're based in New York and London. My question is for Professor Teodrich. I call the professor because I sneak one of your classes in Duke. I wanted to ask, when we get involved with partners and stakeholders about the intersection between climate and AI, we heard a lot lately the phrase, they are not market-ready solutions. I know you're not in the working group of industry and commercialization, you're in race, but what's your position about like getting more market-ready solutions available for the private sector, but at the same time addressing the concerns of the public about respecting data that I wrote down that you were also thinking for the research in 2024. Thank you.
I actually am in the innovation and commercialization working group. And that's where our IP project is held on the licensing. I do think that there are a lot more potential solutions out there. And I think this kind of comes back to, we need to democratize opportunities and, within the AI ecosystem. I mean, whenever I'm meeting with entrepreneurs, whether it's, back in Durham, whether it's, around the US or internationally, I'm just so inspired by all the great developments that they're coming up with. And like where Vilas started, I also am an optimist that, I don't think we have turnkey solutions ready today, but I think if we harness all the talent in the world, we can come up with the solutions. And I think what we need to do from a government perspective is create the incentives so entrepreneurs can develop these solutions, bring them to market, and take down some of the roadblocks, which includes providing access to data, access to infrastructure, so they can grow and thrive. And the last thing I'll just add there too is this is why I think standards is so important, because big tech companies can go and say, well, we've tested this, trust us, this works well. But an entrepreneurial company trying to get market share, particularly when you're talking about critical infrastructure, it can be a tough sell. But if you have standards and they can certify that they've met certain standards, then I think some of the market barriers come down. So I think we need to kind of keep creating opportunities for entrepreneurs, creating the environment so we can have more innovative innovation and competition, and that will lead us to the market solutions that we need.
I'm not going to try and summarize this panel. I think you had a very rich and varied discussion, but I just want to come back for a quick last 10-second intervention from each of our panelists in terms of a call to action and who that call to action is directed to, and around a specific question. I think we've seen in the past kind of 2 decades of technological innovation that global inequality has increased. The rich have gotten richer and the poor have gotten poorer. And there's a risk that that happens again with AI, that the value is accrued amongst a small sort of actors, and the ones who are the most vulnerable to climate action get left behind. So how do we ensure that those who are the most vulnerable to climate action remain at the center of our strategy for AI and climate action? What is your quick call to action and who is it directed at? 10 seconds each, and then we'll break for lunch. And the last request to come in as well.
So it's difficult to summarize in 10 seconds, but still, I just put 3-4 points very quick. One is that from the Indian perspective, we need to build the data infrastructure. This is one important thing. And we need to address the digital divide. And she has talked about the farmers, some are rich farmers, some are poor farmers, but I say, even at a bigger level, some states are very good in data, some states are lagging behind, they don't have the infrastructure. So therefore, what I suggest is that we need to create some kind of reference solutions, and we have to create some kind of supply-based ecosystem of these reference solutions. Probably by these reference solutions, everybody have got access to the solutions, ingest their data, and produce the outputs. This is one important thing. And nowadays, the DPI concept has come, digital public infrastructure, particularly in agriculture. This has to be developed, some kind of a DPI kind of things. And the most important thing is that in the Indian context, I don't know the global perspective, but a lot of duplication of efforts are going on in the AI solutions. And then the last point is that there should be some regulatory mechanism to mainstream these applications.
Thank you. The organizers are nudging me about time, so quick call to action.
Very quickly, we have spent a lot of time here talking about pilots. I think we need to think about pilots that can become projects quickly, projects that can become platforms that can advise policy. So it's no longer about showing a proof of concept, it's about actually building a solution that can address populations at scale and change the way that we think about investing in and owning these products.
10 seconds is difficult. That's my 10 seconds. Yeah. One is most important is openness in architecture, data, knowledge transfer, South-South collaboration. All that is very important. We have to, like you said, build things at scale and build very cheap for Global South, not in millions of dollars. Think of just 5-digit numbers when we talk about solutions, especially for Global South. And have like thick knowledge networks so that innovations can scale across countries. These are important, and start with the most vulnerable population. So if you're really passionate about the problem, go to the most vulnerable community and create the user persona from there and start solving for them. Thank you.
So I would add my call to action is to the youth and to the next generation. I mean, I was in the corporate world for 30 years and have just kind of re-entered the academia world, and I am so inspired by all the young people and the terrific ideas, the innovative ideas. And also, I think this generation, I mean, we've been through traumatic times between the climate crisis, economic crisis, a pandemic. I mean, it really is unprecedented, and I think one of the positive outcomes of all of this is I think there's a real commitment to public service, to public good among the next generation. And I would just encourage all of you, seize the opportunity. Don't wait for old people like me to figure it out. You can do it, and you should do it.
It's going to be difficult to beat all of that. But adding to that, co-creating responsible climate data ecosystem and climate data culture. And the call is to invest more on both of these. That would require more support from governments, philanthropic organizations, multilateral agencies, and more social entrepreneurs to come together and do it. Time is now.
Super. Thank you all. And thank you all for listening, paying attention, and for all your excellent questions. And thank you for the GPI team for helping put this together.
Thank you so much.